Thank you, Pastor Palmer. You're a real trooper. And no pressure now. Thank you. Hello. My name is Libby, and I'm an alcoholic. TV and movies love to dramatize the physical effects of withdrawal. The sweats, the shakes, the sleepless nights, the loss of appetite. But they never quite capture the fear. During the first few weeks of sobriety, the body begins undergoing a total restoration. Our bodies are shockingly resilient, as are our minds. Like cells, memories start to be repaired. Slowly at first, and then those nights of blacking out start to reframe themselves. The beginning is curious, like piecing together a puzzle without knowing what it will look like. But then the floodgates open, and all of those things I did, all of the things I said, all of the things I would have preferred had stayed buried, came rushing back all at once. And with every new memory came a whisper of shame. In every AA meeting, I would hear words of the steps, and every time I heard those bits about a moral inventory and making amends, I shut my eyes and I thought of all of the relationships I had damaged or ruined and the destruction I had done to myself. And that shame is deafening. But before I could begin working on the steps, my sponsor, Jess, gave me a peculiar assignment. For 3 weeks, I was to make a gratitude list. Every day, I would call her in the evening and read 5 new things for which I was thankful. And I'll tell you, when you are in a state of trauma and fear and shame, the last thing I wanted to focus on was gratitude. But then that's the point, isn't it? The slow trickle of things on my list started with simple thanks, things like coffee and chocolate, hot showers on a cold day, the floor heater under my desk. And then I let those reframed memories sink in. There were nights I should not have made it home alive. I made choices that could have killed someone or myself. I could have been in jail or living on the street, but I had a steady job. I had a roof over my head. I had money to pay for food and clothing. I had people in my life, though fewer than before, that still cared about me. And the church, which I had long since given up on, was still there. And I was still alive. Gradually, through gratitude, my chronicle of shame transformed into a diary of grace. My life, my sobriety, it's a miracle. As Pastor Palmer said more eloquently, this reading for today was more than a little confusing and very long. I had to read it through several times before I actually grasped what had happened. There was something about restoring a temple and paying the workers fair wages. Then they found a book and gave it to a secretary who gave it to the priest, who gave it to the king, who gave it to the secretary, who gave it to the priest. And then there was somebody's nephew, and maybe there was a duck or a dog in there. I'm not entirely sure, but they eventually go to a prophetess. And if you remember anything after that, I'm very impressed. So allow me to summarize. So the Temple of Solomon is in total disrepair. And after a long series of corrupt kings in Israel, King Josiah decides he wants to restore the temple. and thereby restore Israel's relationship with God. And he wants to do it right. So his first project is to find the money and make sure that the workers are paid fair wages and trust them to do good work. But then, completely by accident, the workers stumble over an old dusty book of the law, and they hand it over to the priests, who had never seen this book before. And this book is this evidence of all of the sins that Israel has committed against God. And Josiah freaks out. He is convinced that God is so angry with them for their failures, and he's so ashamed that he knows that God is going to destroy them any second now. So the king wants to communicate with God and reaches out to a prophetess, Huldah. And she confirms that, yes, God is very, very mad at you. But because Josiah is repentant, God says that we're just going to hold out on this punishment until after Josiah dies. But then what does Josiah do? Does he go home, sleep like a baby now that he knows it's not going to happen in his lifetime? No. He runs out to the temple and he gathers the people and he makes a new covenant to obey God's commands. And then he extends that covenant to all the people so that all will be inheritors of this covenant of grace. And not simply himself, because when we experience grace, we don't keep it to ourselves. This Thursday is Thanksgiving. I love that we have a national holiday devoted to gratitude. And I know that there are many who believe that we should stop celebrating this holiday because its history is so sullied with the violence our ancestors did to the Native American people. These nice paintings of pilgrims and Native Americans peacefully sitting around the table, sharing deep-fried turkey and sweet potatoes with marshmallows, is a very false image. I think it is all the more rich because of our history. It is an opportunity for a national day of honesty and repentance. A day for us to make a moral inventory of our history, look at the Gospels and see how we have offended God by ignoring the commandment to love God and our neighbor, and by repentance, by the example of King Josiah, seeking a restorative relationship with our Creator, we may then see the miracle that is grace, that is our lives. In spite of our bottomless inventory of violence and oppression, we are still here. God has not destroyed us. God has not abandoned us because we have inherited that covenant of grace. I don't understand the voices who persist in denying the nature of our history. We gain nothing by denial. But by absolute honesty, by truth and repentance, we stand to gain everything. Accepting this covenant of grace, we are thereby equipped to begin making amends, one day at a time. I won't lie to you, this process is terrifying. It's messy and painful and reads like a chronicle of shame. But I can promise you that truth and gratitude and grace together is transformative. We can trust in God's grace no matter what our sin. That is the gift of God's promise. That is the gift of the cross, expanding the covenant to all who dare to come to our Creator with a desire for restoration. Gratitude is not a single thought. It is a state of mind that takes over the entire body, mind, soul, and spirit. Living in a state of gratitude is the gateway to grace, and that grace is contagious. So I want to invite you, as Jess invited me, to start a daily gratitude list. Make a journal. Write down at least 5 things every day you are grateful for, and share it. Share it with a partner, share it with a spouse, call a friend, read it aloud to your pet fish. Say it out loud. Don't keep it to yourself. Grace is not meant to be a secret. Make it a habit and then see what happens. and you will experience how gratitude transforms everything into a diary of grace. I'll close today with a psalm. Some were fools who suffered because of their rebellion, because of their own sins, until they were so sick, nearly at death's door, that food became repugnant. Then they called to Yahweh in their trouble, and God reduced them from their sufferings, sending a word to heal them and snatching them from the pit. Let them thank Yahweh for this great love, for the marvels done for all the people. Let them offer sacrifices of thanksgiving and recount what God has done in joyful song. Now may God grant you the serenity to accept the things you cannot change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.